Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today we're going to be going through our IDP Waiver Wire Week 2 suggestions.
Hike!
Joe, just like our most recent episode, we're going to be giving our top 5 players that piqued our interest, and we're going to be talking about how much we're spending for them in free agency, acquisition budget, or FAAB league. So let's talk about the first player who I think probably had the biggest week 1, which is linebacker Zack Baun of the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, he had 11 solo tackles, 4 assisted, which made it for 15 total tackles, 2 sacks. Joe, he had an incredible game. What do you think about Zack Baun here? How much FAAB are you putting down for him?
Yeah, that's the tough part for me, is just how much FAAB do I put down on him. But I tell you what, I am excited for this guy, and as long as White's is gonna be out for the Eagles, Baun should really get the opportunities. It'll be interesting though. Like, if Devin White's ready, do you think it's Zack Baun that stays, or do you think it be Nakobe Dean?
Well, okay, so he's a former 3rd-round pick from Wisconsin, and right now he almost, he's played, he's had 4 years in New Orleans and did nothing, absolutely nothing. Most tackles.
He's been a special teams player, I feel like.
Yeah, so this is very interesting. Now, I don't know what to think about this guy. I know you're asking me. I think he stays on with White, but I don't know for sure. Dean can't really stay healthy. Both of them, if you look at the snap counts, Baun played 100% of the snaps at 67, and Dean had 64, which was 96% of the snaps. Those were the 2 linebackers primarily. White would definitely become the guy, I would think, in that group. And so that's my question. But White, he had a tough year in Tampa Bay. Is Baun now the guy? We've seen linebackers in Philadelphia do very, very well. You had guys like TJ Edwards, Keion White in the past. They've been able, back in the day, you saw this, it's a different system, I guess. It just seems like Philadelphia Eagles linebackers do quite well.
Yeah, but I do think Vic Fangio's system works well here. I think he's like in that zone style. Linebackers traditionally do well. As far as the percentage of FAAB, I guess I'll say 5 to 10%. He is a guy that I'm interested in. I think he's definitely worth rostering. You're seeing if he's got the chance. Like you said, he played 100% of the snaps. He was all over the field against the Philadelphia Eagles. He really just absolutely.
Packers?
Oh, yes. He plays for the Eagles.
Unless you watch him in practice and he looked that good too. But...
No. It was, all over the field, against the Packers in Brazil, making all the tackles, making the plays. So I am excited for this guy if he continues to get the opportunity.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I actually will go a little bit higher than you, because at the end, I was a big believer in a White bounce back, but if this could stop a White bounce back, and it could be the Zack Baun show. So to me, I might feel like, this guy may be the guy as the Philadelphia linebacker. And it wouldn't be a shocker if he continues on this pace. He could be a linebacker 1. So in that case, I feel like he's worth probably 15 to 20% of your FAAB.
Yeah, he definitely could be. If you want to be more aggressive and you feel like you can't miss this guy, I think just part of the tough thing is, it depends on how you value linebackers. It's just mainly if enough of them get an opportunity, they've got a chance to get you a decent amount of IDP points. But I do think he is better than an average linebacker though.
Are you enjoying this episode so far? Well, if you are, subscribe to our YouTube channel, smash that like button, and hit the notification bell for upcoming videos. We do videos throughout the year, so you're not going to want to miss what we have in store. So let's talk about the next guy, Joe, who is my guy. For me, I was really, pushing him hard during the offseason. You liked him as well. Defensive lineman Keion White of the New England Patriots. He had 4 total tackles, 3 solo, 2.5 sacks, and a forced fumble. Guy was an absolute wrecking ball. Was curious as to if he would be able to succeed without Judon. He was able to. Joe, he's not rostered that much. He's only 13% rostered. So, Joe, how much are you going to put down to get this guy?
Yeah, I think I would go for Keion White. I'd be willing to spend up for him. Especially if you are in a league that, you have to start a defensive tackle. I think it could be a different story if it's just like a D lineman position, where you mix in like edge rushers and things. But if you got to play exclusively a defensive tackle, maybe even two, I think he's definitely worth it. Christian Barmore, I'm not sure where he's at in terms of when he's going to come back with the blood clot issues, but I mean, for as long as he's out, Keion White should be dominant. So I think I'd be willing to go 15 to 20% for Keion White, just because defensive tackles are hard to find, and it's hard to find the productive ones, and especially the ones that give you that sack upside. And I think he definitely provides that.
Yeah, and for those who are tuning in here, we view him as an interior defensive line, and I think he does kind of play all the field, but primarily he's playing in the interior. So he's not an outside linebacker like an Anthony Jennings, like a Joshua Che that the Patriots have on their roster. So I'm with you. I'm spending up for this guy. I think at least in that case, like you're saying, or in a deep league, I would say he's worth at least 20% of your FAAB.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it just really depends on your roster settings and everything like that. But if you got to play defensive tackle, and hopefully your league has him, at defensive tackles, that's where we truly believe he should be playing.
So let's talk about a guy who was recently traded to the Chicago Bears, and that's edge rusher Darrell Taylor. Ended up with 8 total tackles, 7 solo, 2 sacks, and a forced fumble in his debut for the Bears. Joe, I think you and I were both pretty surprised when we looked at the stat sheet as to what Darrell Taylor did. We didn't remember that, but he did quite well. And at the end of the day, he's not rostered all that much. Right now, he's 9% rostered. So are you kicking the tires on this guy? How much you spending?
Yeah, I do think he's worth kicking the tires on. I don't know if I'd go crazy. I might probably somewhere between the 5 and 10% range, just because they played the Titans. Will Levis seemed to really be holding onto the ball a lot, trying to make those scramble plays. They're playing the Houston Texans next, so I do think that'll be a tougher test for him, in order to get the Stroud. So I'll be curious to see how he does. But if there's other matchups he could exploit, he could still be worth at least having on your roster.
Yeah, it's interesting because the guy that is the primary guy that's there is Montez Sweat, right? I mean, he's their number one guy.
Yeah.
But if you look at it, Montez Sweat only played 69% of the snaps. Darrell Taylor played 59% of the snaps. So he didn't really play all that much. So, and then they also have DeMarcus Walker, who I believe they have him more interior than on the outside. So it looks like it is primarily Sweat and Taylor. Taylor as the opposite guy. I think he's 5% or less. I think he's worth a flyer. I'm not spending too much on him. I don't know if he's going to sustain what he was able to do this past week because we know in IDP it's feast or famine. So,
Right,
I mean, he
yeah.
feasted this past week. I don't know. I mean, you've got to be really good, like the cheat code that is TJ Watt, if you're going to consistently get these numbers week in and week out. So that's when I might not chase. I think it's interesting. But I think ultimately, if you've got a bench spot, it's worth it. But
yeah, I mean, he's got Houston in week 2, like I mentioned. Then week 3, he's going to Indianapolis, which he could get some play there. Also week 4 against the Rams, who've had some offensive line issues. If their left tackle still cannot go, maybe he takes advantage. And then, Carolina Panthers, it seems like he should be able to get to Bryce Young as well. So, I think he's worth a speculative ad. I'm not sure I would play him in week 2, but maybe you play him in some of those other games.
So, Joe, let's talk about another guy Well, I think you and I are both surprised that we're talking about here. Demarvion Overshown of the Dallas Cowboys linebacker, only rostered in 16% of leagues. It honestly was more than I thought. But he had 5 solo tackles, 6 assisted, which made up 11 total tackles, and a sack. So how much are you putting down for Overshown here?
Yeah, I don't know that I'd be putting a lot for him. I mean, I'd be curious to know what the snap count percentage between like him and Eric Kendricks. I mean, Eric Kendricks is the main linebacker, kind of the signal of the defense there. Um, just wondering if he's kind of also benefited from the fact that this game was pretty much an absolute rout against the Browns. So I'm not so sure. I'd probably I maybe under 5 if you want to take a shot. I don't necessarily trust him moving forward.
So Kendricks played 51 snaps for a total of 67%. Overshown was the next at 44 with 58%. Then they had Damone Clark at 26 snaps for 34%. So there is somewhat of a rotation going on there. However, I believe Eric Kendricks got injured during that game. I believe he's questionable for the following game. So that could mean that Overshown could be taking over as a Dallas linebacker. I mean, they've needed a good linebacker for quite some time.
Yeah.
Ever since they moved Parsons into the edge. So this one's a tough one for me. I would prioritize Baun over Overshown.
Right.
But I wouldn't mind if you're just saying, hey, I want both. I would put in a claim for both, put more on for Baun. If you miss out on Baun, hopefully you get Overshown. Because I may monitor the Kendricks injury. I don't know how significant it is off the top of my head. I'd leave probably 5%. I wouldn't go nuts.
Yeah, I wouldn't go nuts either. I mean, the Kendricks injury, if it is serious or if he is going to miss, I mean, that obviously makes Overshown more interesting. But if they're going to continue to split, I'm not going crazy.
So last player we're going to be talking about is safety Nick Cross. He ended up getting the starting job for the Indianapolis Colts. Ended up playing 100% of the snaps, Joe. 79 snaps. He's rostered in 11% of leagues, and he had 14 total tackles, 8 solo, 6 assisted. What are your thoughts here on Nick Cross? Are you interested? You putting any FAAB down for him?
Yeah, I definitely think he could be worthy of an ad. Especially, hey, I tell you, it's rare that guys are playing 100% of snaps. It is kind of, I feel like at the safety position, it could be more likely, but just with the amount of different formations all these defenses play and how they like to sub guys in and out and create those mismatches. But I think he's got a chance on this defense to be productive. Yeah, I think partially that tackle numbers could be slightly inflated just because the Texans ran so much. But if teams are going to continually be able to run against them, maybe that trend continues for him. So I'd probably go 5%. I think he's an interesting ad, but I'm not going to go crazy spending for him.
Yeah, I mean, interesting, right? Former 3rd-round pick out of Maryland. He's a guy who was able to beat out Thomas for the starting role there. I actually am a believer in this one. It's going to be him and Blackman has done quite well as the safety there and has done well as an IDP player and getting the stats. So I don't think this is. I mean, you're right. You're right that they ran Joe Mixon a ton, but I think that Nick Cross. He would be a speculative ad for me. I think 5%. What I don't know if he's going to be all world, but enough where it's like okay. I think this guy's definitely worth rostering. I mean, I would imagine his ownership should go way up after what happened. If they just look at the usage of him in the game.
Yeah, I mean, I did see they do get to play the Green Bay Packers next week, which I don't know if you heard the news, but Malik Willis is looking to start next week. So hey, maybe he's able to get an interception in that game because not sure about Malik Willis and what that Packers offense is going to be able to do.
Well, and the fact that Malik Willis will probably run a lot, and they'll probably rely a lot on Josh Jacobs. So,
right,
we saw what happened with Joe Mixon. So, could at least in the short term, could still be a good play. To even possibly start Nick Cross.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like I said, definitely, worth an ad. But a lot of that was tackles. With safeties, I'd like to get some guys that actually get some pass deflections or chances for interception, which maybe that is to come. It is just 1 week here.
It is just 1 week, and that's where I think I know in our most recent episode, you were getting on me that you need to spend early and often for, drop that FAAB down and get those offensive players, because by week 7, week 8, they're all going to be gone. On the defensive side, maybe you were going to have a little bit more pause because they're feast
Yeah.
or famine, and it's hard to know. You really have to kind of get into more of the metrics, and that's why guys like Baun and White, who you and I were on earlier, those two guys catch my eye, because we already thought White could ascend already right out of the gate. He did. And we knew that Eagles linebacker role was possibly up for grabs with Devin
Right.
White being injured.
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, and I don't have that same philosophy with this IDP stuff. I think just because there's a lot more players involved in random players that could come out of the woodworks, and like you said, the volatility of the defense is also tough. So I definitely am not a believer with the defensive side to be as aggressive with the FAAB and the waivers as compared to the offensive side of the ball.
So that does it for this episode. Like I mentioned a little earlier, check out our most recent episode where we talked about our waiver wire week 2 must adds for the offensive players. You're not going to want to miss that. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time.